so do you guys just mind telling us a little bit about yourself, like personally, or your career, or like your sort of journey and things like that?
Okay, so something that I didn't mention in my biography, which is maybe the main reason why I'm here, is that I was recently appointed as a United Nations Foundation Next Generation Fellow. And right now my work is basically listening to young people around the world and really, actually actively hearing what they want to see in the United Nations, because we're writing a set of recommendations to give to the Secretary General. So I really want to also use this space to hear everyone. We have a big audience and a big, very diverse audience. So I really want to take this opportunity to hear everyone out. And if I can, take all of the notes that I need to take so I can also take this information to where it needs to be.
Yep, awesome. Thank you for that. Any volunteers for the next speaker?
I can go. It's okay. I can go. So my personal story. So I am actually a theater artist, which is so funny because all of my work stems kind of from theater for social change. I have a degree in acting, so that's how I learned to facilitate and train. So that's really how I got started working and teaching theater and arts to communities of like people of color and BI, Black identifying people of color, who I didn't have a lot of resources. And then that led me to kind of journey into teaching and teaching English and teaching a lot of like just youth development skills that, youth need, but they might not have like the resources to get it. So that's a little bit of my personal like background.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Next up.
Hi, I can share as well. So a little bit of my background. I actually did not even start as a political science major. I'm sure like many people, especially if you're an immigrant to the United States, you don't really know what's going on with the political system. I most certainly did not, and neither were my parents involved at all. So it was really up to me to kind of investigate and figure out, how to vote, how to inform my parents and some of my family members. And through just informing myself and getting involved and in touch with some friends, I got immersed into the political sphere, and I decided to then drop my first major and go all into political science. And honestly, since then, and engaging and organizing my community has really changed not only my life, but I see also my community's lives. And it has really just been so impactful. And I think one of the big reasons I decided to go into youth organizing, because you really see how much of an impact it makes on someone's life, starting at their house, in their home, and being able to spread that to other people's homes and now have them understand and engage and want to reach representatives and make that great change has just been so incredibly rewarding, which is why I do the work that I do.
Awesome. I guess I'm going last. But yeah, no, I'm only 20, so I can say like I definitely have like a lot of things I still need to do. But up until this moment, I'm someone who has a strong emphasis on equity and accessibility, and those are things I feel really passionate about, especially at the University of Toronto. We're one of the larger universities in Canada, and these are issues that are really important, especially because we have such a diverse population of not only people who are Canadian, but also international students. The reason that, unlike, I know a couple of people mentioned political science, I've taken some poli-sci classes. I was not too good at them, but I did end up going into peace, conflict, and justice, which is more of an emphasis on global innovation, which is something I'm really interested in. I think that a lot of the world's problems are not problems, but rather things that we need to think of in innovative ways to actually come up with solutions to them. Because at the end of the day, those things don't go away. Rather, we just need to remedy them and look at them in a different light. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for those introductions. Yep. And yeah, I guess the next question, which is kind of interlinked with that one, is how and when did you guys know that you guys wanted to focus on those fields? Like, was there an aha moment, or was it just like something you've always been passionate about? And if it wasn't, like, do you have any suggestions for people who may not know like what exactly they want to focus on? And yeah, just it's a very broad question, so feel free to answer that however you please. But yeah. Should we go in like reverse order this time? Hannah, would you mind going first?
Yeah, I can go first. So For my studies, I think what kind of prompted me in that direction was that when I was in high school, I was super focused on the sciences because everyone's like, if you want a job, you're going to need to study chemistry or biology. And I tried doing that and I failed miserably. So that was not something I was good at. And I remember taking a class that was on challenge and change, and it was focusing on pretty much what I study now, like global issues and how to tackle them, but looking at them from like social perspectives, political, economic, things like that. And that's what really drove me to my program. I can say that peace, conflict, and justice is one of the only of its kind in Canada. It's a really small cohort, and we get to work with NGOs. So right now I'm an intern at the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, which has been an amazing experience. And I think that as I go through this, hopefully I will learn more about myself, because I know that I only know so much at this point, but that's what led me up to being where I am today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Go next.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so I think for me, like I mentioned before, I was not originally a political science student. If anything, I was actually a business student. But I was, at the time, I was in community college, and I had a friend who I was working with, and she said, you know, Marie, I'm working on this campaign. It's so much fun. Do you want to join me? And I was like, I don't know, I'm not into politics. But after, I think her, you know, she was very persistent and a great organizer that way. She asked again and she asked again. And I finally said, okay, Justine, I will go with you. And after that first time knocking doors, I loved it. I fell in love with it. I loved talking to people. I loved, you know, informing them about these the campaigns. Luckily, also, I really I met the now my representative who ended up winning. But at the time, I met him and he was so kind. And I imagined, I was like, wow, if every representative who was just, you know, cared this much about their community and wanted to help, why shouldn't we be helping them? And I think that's, again, what really propelled me to this organizing field in political science. And so then after that, after that campaign, again, we won, and I was so incredibly excited. And I finally saw for myself, you know, we can make change if we really all come together and do this and support the people who are willing to make that change in your community. And yeah, again, I never looked back. I switched my major, I kept going, and I ended up being also the first woman in my whole family to graduate from university. And so again, things like that really propelled me into political science, because, you know, a friend initially came to me and you know, asked me to organize with her. So yeah, that again, that's really what propelled me in. So when a friend asks you if you want to go organize, maybe you want to say yes, because it could change your life.
For me, I guess what got me started, well, I applied for a different major when I was going to university, and I got in, but the school kind of like rose the price tag like a week before the semester started. So then I switched my major so it was forensic science. Then I was like, this is too expensive. Then I went to theater. So that's kind of the one thing that got me into theater. And then after that, volunteering is really the thing that kind of like made me really connect with just people and just students in particular. Yeah, it's just being able to like volunteer and spend time with communities, I think is just such a rewarding experience. And there were times where like, literally I would be feeling so sad, but like communities would come up to me and they would be like, okay, thank you. Or they'll just be like, oh, let's do this. Or like, there'll be like little kid who like has like no teeth and he's like running around. He's like, hey, like, come on, come play with me. And I'm just like, okay. So yeah, it's just like those little experiences that really keep me going, because like, no matter, you really get to see like how strong the human spirit is. And you really get to see that like, no matter what's going on, like, there's always like happiness, there's always some joy if you just look for it. So yeah.
I want to follow up on Maria's idea of she not being into politics. And I find it very funny because most of the people that are really into politics, I feel like their first encounter is really that idea of like, oh no, I'm not into it. And I think it was kind of similar for me. Since I was very young, my dad always told me that I was going to be a lawyer. And I don't know why I was always against that idea. I was like, no, I'm not going to be a lawyer. Like, that is not going to happen. And because I was so against the idea, I cannot even, like, if you ask me why, maybe I would say that I was maybe overwhelmed because of how heavy politics are in Mexico. Maybe that was the reason why I was like so against it. But because I was against it, I was like, no, I'm just going to find something like very different to get into. And one thing led to the other, and I ended up participating in Model United Nations. And I was like, this sounds like a good idea. It's like politics, but it's not in my house, well, not in my country. So like, it's like a good enough balance, you know? So I started getting into international relations. And something that is very interesting is that the entire time I had been avoiding, you know, domestic politics, politics related to Mexico. And when you get into international relations, what you realize is like what matters the most is actually what is happening in your own country, because like that is really what shapes everything. Like the local sphere really has the power to shape the international sphere. So I feel like that was a very eye-opening thing to learn, and something that really made me want to also get more involved with what was happening at the local level. And if I could say that there was something that especially you know, led the way for me into activism, was definitely feminism. I think that at the time when I was younger, I didn't know that the word for what I was looking for was feminism. I just knew there was just like this big gender gap that my family members were experiencing in their personal lives. And I was just like so angry about that experience that they were going through. And I was just like trying to look for information, resources, like learning how to, you know, like help them, or like help them navigate these situations. And I think that what really allowed me to get more involved as I am today was definitely looking up for mentorship. And at that time, that was Girl of Org. And I am incredibly grateful for them for leading me into, you know, discovering new paths and discovering what I wanted to be in that sphere.
Yep, awesome. Thank you all so much for those incredibly inspirational answers. I apologize if there's some pinging in the background. It's because people are joining the call, and that's why there's a bit of interruption. But yeah, so the next question is just how exactly has like the COVID-19 pandemic affected your work? Like, has it been significant? And yeah, things like that. This time, do you want to go like maybe alphabetically? Does that help? So I think Aris, you're up first.
Yeah, of course. So COVID-19 has like, I think it's really interesting because like when COVID-19 first struck, everyone was saying the world is completely stopped. And when I was like interviewing for jobs last year, when I was like crying coming back from the Philippines because I had to leave the country because of COVID, I was talking to my friends, and we were just like, yes, a lot of businesses and a lot of like financial institutions have stopped, but like youth development and like international relations and how you develop communities doesn't stop, right? Those issues don't stop because of COVID-19. Like people are still homeless, people are still like fighting for food, they're still fighting to have financial resources. And even now with international education, like they're fighting for education, the right to have an education. So COVID-19 really just kind of like exacerbated those issues and kind of like put them on this larger scale of like our social infrastructure globally is like really, really bad. So like it was good because we were able to see that like we need to focus on these issues and we need to like really hone down on like what's the problem and not just throw money at the situation. But also at the really hard, like the really kind of bad thing is that like we are still virtual. So a lot of the work that we want to do where it's like face to face or where it's in person, it's just a lot harder to do now safely. So we kind of have like a smaller reach of participants and youth that we can work with, but like we still have to do the work. So yeah.
I guess I can go next if we're doing alphabetical. But I think that the COVID-19 pandemic, like I first kind of need to acknowledge that I come from a place of privilege because Canada has been impacted by COVID, but not like other countries. And I think it's really important to kind of like give voice to that because I know that like for youth here, it's been hard, but I can only imagine what it's like in other places where like vaccines aren't being given out at such a rapid rate and things like that. I know that for like my field of work personally, which is research at my university, and also with the work that I do with like activism, COVID-19 has impacted the field of work because it's impacted the people that work within it. At the end of the day, like mental health and the mental well-being of people that are working in every industry has like been impacted in such a substantial way, especially youth, because you're already balancing so many other things. You have school, job, family, all these type of things. And then on top of it, there's a global pandemic that has decided to wreak havoc on your life. And I think that that in itself is like the biggest hard-hitting thing for each person, because the way that you carry yourself after being hurt by COVID then needs to go on, and you represent yourself at work or in the ways that you engage with your community. So I know for me, like at our amnesty meetings, it's been really important that we're always kind of getting idea of where everyone is at mentally, physically, and how they're doing, because you need to be on the same page with other people that you're working with for substantial change to actually come out of it. I know for myself, like COVID was really hard for me because it's crazy. It changed everything about the way that we live. But I spent a lot of time thinking about issues that like I'd previously been thinking about. And at first it was like you feel very alone because you quite literally are alone. But then you remember that like, I have a tiny bit more time on my hands. Let me try to get down to work with this. So my field of work has been impacted because not only at first did it impact me negatively, but it also has propelled me to like try to make more change, because of the fact that I'm like, the world is in this place, but this is kind of a refresh for us to start over and make a change for everyone.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think Maria, you're next up.
All right. So yeah, no, thank you, Hannah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned, kind of centering that wellness, especially your mental health right now. I think it has been such a big thing. But just quickly, how the pandemic has affected my work. Well, we're in field, this is organizing, and we've had to quite literally change everything that we do, right? We're not door knocking anymore. We're not, talking to our community members. So we really had, haul just everything we were traditionally doing before and change it. So at least at Blue Future, we would have been running, again, a campaign program, getting folks involved in local elections. But this time around, we pivoted, just like you do in any kind of political sphere. And we are now running what we call the Spring for Progress and Change program, where we are helping students and organizing with them, teaching them on issue advocacy issues all across the United States, but also helping them create youth councils in their states, right? Like just because you can't organize with people in person, you can still organize virtually. So yeah, we've definitely pivoted a lot to just online organizing. And thankfully, it's been overall, I think, going pretty well. Again, it's not the same as, being with person and organizing and having those conversations, but we've had to initiate different kinds of activities. Hannah, again, just like you mentioned, making your priority of mental health. We are also organizing different wellness workshops. Something really cool that we've also been doing is having professional development workshops as well, something more one-on-one, individual. So hopefully folks still feel like they're still able to connect and talk to someone and work through those different kinds of issues. Because again, it's not the same as in-person field organizing, but I think it's also been really great to find innovative ways to fight to these challenges that we're facing right now. So although yes, it's been incredibly hard, but I think this has also brought out, again, just the ingenuity, creativity, and the strength in people. And it has just been really rewarding to see.
Yeah, I feel like the experience that I had was definitely more related to some things that were happening in my country, in Mexico. When the pandemic started, it was March 13. It was a few days ago, few days after the national feminist protest. It happened in March 8th and March 9th. What happened is that in March 8th, there were national manifestations in different states within the country. And in March 9th, many people decided to protest by not attending their schools or their works in order to, raise consciousness on the high amount of feminicides here in Mexico. So I didn't have the opportunity to participate because I was studying in the US at the time. But there was just like this big wave of, empowerment of women. Like women really felt like they had the opportunity to participate and let the people know what was happening. And then few days later, it happens that everyone has to go back home. Like you cannot even go to Congress to ask your Congress people what the changes you want to see. You cannot go to your representative. It was just like a big 180 difference of what happened a few days before. So I think that definitely in the activist sphere, what I saw is that it was very hard for people to transition from physical manifestations, physical activism into online activism. And there's this also very popular term that is slacktivism, that is basically this idea of like activists that are participating online and like people who only share just to like look good and whatever. And I think it's very interesting how our perception on that has changed due to the pandemic, because now people who have the privilege of having to go outside to manifest or to, you know, work, many of us are depending on online tools and online resources. So now the question is, to what extent are we selectivists? To what extent are we activists? I think it's a very important conversation, and it's also very linked to our mental health, because many times as activists we think that if we're just sharing an image on, I don't know, our Instagram or our social media, then we're not doing enough. But if we go outside and we, you know, risk our lives, maybe that's too much, you know? So it's just like this interesting dilemma of redefining activism, redefining how we protest and educate and just like manifest in order to look for social justice. So I think COVID has really changed a lot of things. I think that what I'm very excited for is to see what happens in the post-pandemic world. And especially, I have been looking a lot into civic technologies, and I have a lot of hope that we see a rise of civic technologies so we can also digitalize and, you know, look for improvement in activism online.
Yeah, thank you so much for that once again. Yeah, it was a really great insights into like your individual sectors, which I know a lot of our attendees are interested in. So thank you so much. And the next question is basically, are there any common misconceptions about your field of work or fields of work? And I'm not very creative, so do you guys mind if we go in reverse alphabetical order? Will that work?
Can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry for that.
Sure, yeah. So are there any common misconceptions about your field of work or fields of work?
Yes, I mean, I think it's very interesting. I think it has a lot to do with the generational gap, because I feel like Gen Z right now is very passionate about social justice. Maybe that has to do especially with, you know, climate change and how we are more interested in really seeing much more being done for our planet. So maybe that's the reason why we are more into activism and social justice. But I feel like it's also very interesting seeing how older generations, maybe they don't understand our passion behind what we're doing. Many times they don't understand why we feel like so personally connected to these things. And something that I also think is very important, like a conversation that I think we should be having and making less taboo, is also, you know, I think it's, I mean, and it's taboo for a reason, why, right? And I think it's just looking for remuneration for what we do. Activism, like I don't do activism to get money, not at all. Like that is not the reason why I'm doing it. I do it because I'm passionate about it. But it's also a conversation that we need to have, because like many of us who are into activism and social justice and, you know, consulting in anything that has to do with social sciences, many times people think it's just something you do for free. So like then we're having the tough conversations of like, okay, I cannot live my entire life just of like doing free work for like these big corporations that want to have insight into activism and social justice. So I think that's a very important conversation that we need to have. And it's also something that many times people don't understand, because people think like, you're doing it because you're passionate, and you're like, yeah, and I built my entire career out of my passion. So what I'm going to be, how am I going to sustain myself if I don't find a way to, you know, remunerate on this? So I think that's a very interesting dilemma.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point. I think something that's becoming like more common now itself, especially with things like, you know, from things like pay or interns, like those campaigns to like ensuring that there's remuneration for like things like this as well. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I think the next person is Maria.
Yes, so that was a really interesting question that I had to kind of think about, but I think a common misconception, I think more particularly in the political field, is that everyone knows everything. I definitely came in thinking that everyone was an expert knew and I didn't. But that's far from the truth. If anything, it seems like we're all really on the same page. We're all trying to figure things out, especially right now in the pandemic, as we've been talking about. You know, so much has been changed. And so I think I really had to get out of that mind space that, again, everyone had the answer, everyone knew anything. If anything, the complete opposite, right? It really takes a group of people to come together and talk about the issues, brainstorm, collect from everyone's different perspectives and because then you can really learn and understand the issues and then find proper solutions for them. And again, that was just particularly in the political field that I had that. But I also, on the side, work in social media. And something else I learned just in the social media field is that people are really so willing. This is more on a connection basis. People really are so willing to help and connect with you and talk about you, about different opportunities. And again, that's something that I thought that everyone was trying to hold those secrets in for themselves, you know, for their own personal gain or success. But again, that is so far from the truth. So I would encourage everyone here as well, right? If you ever want to talk or break something down, reach out. And honestly, folks are so much more willing to talk and brainstorm with you and share their expertise and experience than I think we really kind of let ourselves believe. So use people as your resources, talk to them, brainstorm with them, pick their brains. You know, we really are, I believe, especially in these spaces, trying to help each other out. So when you find someone, reach out. Don't be afraid. Don't let your fears, as I do sometimes, kind of hold you back. Right? Really push for that next level. Because again, help is out there. So don't let any of these misconceptions blind you.
Yeah, no, I think you both have said some like really amazing points. I think that a common misconception, especially when you go to when you're at a place like U of T, a lot of the time it's like people engage in activism and it's seen as like very relating close to slacktivism because of the fact that it's like people are only doing it for face. And I think that that's like a massive misconception that a lot of people just have about activism and advocacy in general. And I think that's something that needs to change because at the end of the day, like, no, not everyone who participates in activism and advocacy has time. They make the time, and that's why they are engaging with it. And I think the first step to like being able to have more people involved in like youth empowerment and also within like communities is by making sure that like people know this is about making the time for this, and eventually like it will kind of come through, if that makes sense. I think like a really big struggle for me has been like trying to explain to people like, oh, you can get involved. It's just like you need that extra push. And I've been in that position where it's like I needed a push from someone to get me involved in something. But once I was, it was like such a rewarding experience. So yeah.
All right. I guess for me, I thought of a couple things like automatically. I think the first biggest misconception is volunteerism. And that pretty much is the difference between like volunteering with passion versus volunteering just to travel the world. And that's a really big issue that like we have to talk about because a lot of the countries where people go to volunteer are, most of the demographics of those countries are people of color. And you know what we have to kind of discuss is how like colonialism and like colorism and all these isms fit into this global oppression, the scale of global oppression, and how like they're put on these poorer countries. So volunteerism is definitely a big thing. And like I think a lot of people will say like, oh well, you get to travel. Like yes, I do, but like you know, I'm always like checking myself to make sure I'm traveling for the right reasons. And before I go to a country, I'm checking to make sure that I'm like, okay, cool. Am I going because there's passion there? Can I help people? Or am I just going because I have other agendas? So I think that's the first big main conception. Then I think the second one is really kind of expenses that go into kind of international education. Because a lot of times, like, it's like you wait in one country or your home country, you get a job, and then you go, and then you come back and you wait until you get a job again. So sometimes expenses can be a little high for like visas and like passports and things like those, because not all like jobs or like organizations will actually pay for you to travel somewhere. There's a lot of free money out there, I want to say that, but like not everybody will actually pay for you. So sometimes you really do have to pay out of pocket. So like it took me like 3 or 4 years to make sure that I had enough before I could just like start going off and doing things. So yeah, and then I guess the final one is like cultural kind of like interpretations, because cultures are so unique and they change based on where you are. And as like a Black American and as like a someone that is a person of color, I have to be cognizant of those because the American media is strife with racism, and like that goes out globally. So like sometimes I'm in a like country where I think everything's great, and somebody will say something, I'm just like, whoa, where'd that come from? So like really being open, I think you have to really be open to kind of like these new ideas and these new cultures, because like something can change immediately and you're like completely out of the blue, and then you're just like, oh, what do I do now? Like you just have to be open to that change, and it's not always going to be easy. Sometimes you're going to be alone, but like, you know, that's the greatest thing about connection. So
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing those insights as well. And yeah, this is kind of, I suppose, similar to that as well. So it might just be the same answer. But what's something you wish you knew about your current field of work before you started? Like whether it's like feminism or like international volunteering, whatever it is, like what's something you knew before you started doing that? And sorry, clockwise order this time. So for on my screen, it's Maria, then Hannah, then Valeria, and then Aris. So anything works, honestly. I'm just trying to mix it up.
No problem. Well, yeah, that's also one that I think about, but I think just specifically something I guess I wish I would have known is really to organize. It's something that I've really grown to love, but you know, really organizing takes a lot of your own personal time, a lot of personal investment. You really have to be passionate about it, right? This is definitely not something, I don't want to scare anyone, but this is not for the, you know, for the weak of heart. You know, it really, you know, you'll have days, I've had days where I'm ready to go in to organize, you know, starting my first shift at 8, and I might not leave until 10 or 11 at night if I'm finishing a fundraising event or something. But again, you know, if it's something that you really feel within you that you're passionate about, you will really do whatever it takes. But just something to keep in mind, right? Especially if you have, if you want to have, you know, personal development goals within those few years, I found it to be incredibly just like life-changing. Again, you know, being so in depth and immersed in my community for an extended period of time, especially if you're working on elections, just something to anticipate. But again, even though it was a lot more, I guess you could say, time consuming in my own personal life, I also just grew so much. Again, if you're spending, you know, 12, 14 hours plus with your community on a daily basis, you will really start to get to know people, know the leaders in those communities, where the hotspots are, and also, but what are some of the issues that people are really struggling with? And I think those experiences give you so much insight and again, into those communities, and make, I think, us experts at the end of it, now knowing, you know, what some of the issues again, but also what are things that we can put into practice to make those things better. And then again, as you're organizing, learning about the candidates as well. There's so much that just goes into it. So yeah, something to consider, but you just learn so much during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think organizing is an amazing skill to have. And yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So, next up is Hannah.
So something I think that I really should have known before I got into kind of like advocacy, people will shut you down. I think that is the biggest thing. A lot of the time when you're working towards a common goal, whether that be climate change or disarming the Hill, like what we do, a lot of the time you're going to think everyone is in this together and we all have the same goals, and then you realize everyone has completely different goals, like everyone. And it's kind of one of the most like disheartening things to swallow, because you're like, I really want everyone to like, you know, view this the same way as me or things like that. And then you realize like sometimes people have other goals. And especially for us, like what we're focusing on is like disarming the Hill, which is literally like Canada needs to decrease their arms sales. Like it's at a point where we're selling over like $3 billion worth of arms every single year. 2 billion goes to Saudi Arabia, which is not surprising. And it's like, oftentimes you're going to engage with representatives or even NGOs who are going to try to like strive away from having those difficult conversations, or they're going to shut you down and they're not going to reply to your emails. And the first thing that you need to do is just like pick yourself back up and just keep going. I think that like at the end of the day, no one's going to tell you that until you're in it and you've faced it. And then it's going to be up to you whether you're going to want to continue or not. And continuing is like the first step to like tangible change. So yeah, when people shut you down, which is common, you just got to keep going.
I think Hannah's point is super interesting, and I many times think about it, like especially now that we basically depend on social media and on being online the entire day, how social media is so misleading. Because if you just follow the people that think like you, like the entire day, you can think like everyone thinks like you, everyone agrees with what you think, etc. And sometimes I had to make those decisions of like whether to stop following someone that I don't agree with or not, just because I feel like also having the counterpoint of what you think, it's important to like have on the back of your mind, so you remind yourself that not everything is like what you think it should be, or like not everyone agrees with you. But directly answering the question, I think something that I would have liked to know would be that I don't have to save the world. I feel like so many times activists, we think that if the world is ending, it's our fault because we didn't do enough. And sometimes it feels like you're like the only person in charge of everything. And I think it's very important to remind ourselves that all of the problems around the world, they are intersectional, they're multilateral, they're transnational, they're like everything that you can think about, they are that, because it's not only about you, it's about like multiple different people and multiple different histories around the world that have led to what is happening today. So I think it's very important to find your niche, obviously not limit yourself to it, but like find what you're really passionate about and just focus on that, and like don't let the bigger problem get to you. Don't let it like control how you feel or how you think, because at the end of the day, you do have a community that you can ask help for. You do have mentorships that you can potentially communicate with and ask for advice. I just think that's very important, and that is always very connected with emotional intelligence. Like especially when you are working on something that you're passionate about, you have to be very emotionally intelligent and remind yourself who you are, what you do, why you do what you do, and just what brought you to this entire area and field.
Those are so many great answers. I was like, wow, I can relate to all of them. For me, I would have to say sustainability and the power of language are things that I really wish I knew. Language and culture are like so intertwined and mixed that like if you try to take them apart, it's going to be really hard to do. So really getting to know a culture, really getting to know a community can be just as simple as like learning the language, or just really trying to connect through like either through slangs or formal language like that. Of course, it's always, you have to ask permission to like use community like centric language, things like that. But that's really important. And sustainability, because like in youth development and community development work, you actually never really see the change. Like you're really only there for like a year to two, and then like you're off to another job. So like you never really know like if which lessons like stuck there with the people you're working with, or you never know kind of like which lessons kind of went away. But then you see them 5 years later and they're just like, oh my gosh, I never forgot this one thing. But like that's something where like you can't really like beat yourself against the head when you're evaluating or like looking over your projects, because like you don't know how someone received it. Like they could have received it completely different than how you planned it. So really just thinking about sustainability and just knowing that like what you do is what you do. It's okay. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, hopefully someone's still able to get something positive.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with everything you guys said. And I think a lot of people in the chat also agree with that. So thank you. And so this question may not necessarily apply to everyone because it's kind of specific, but have you ever made any mistake which ended up being beneficial in the long run? Was there any like sort of like slip up or whichever which ended up being more positive than negative? And also I've got ideas for orders, so just any takers just to go ahead and unmute.
I think I could go first with this one, just because it was a more recent experience. But over the pandemic, previous to the job I have now, I had another job in education. I really enjoyed it, but again, because of the pandemic, I was let go and I lost my job. I was so sad because I was not able to work with my students anymore. I really enjoyed working with people and educating people, again, just on all different materials. But yeah, unfortunately, I lost my job and I was thinking to myself, well, let me start looking for more jobs. But then I had this idea in my head, you know, it was 2020 elections. And I was thinking to myself, you know, what if I don't look for a job and just immerse myself 100% into the elections? It was going to be really hard because, again, I didn't have a job. I had to move back in with my parents. But thankfully, with their kindness and support, I was able to pursue that goal of mine and just, again, work completely on the campaigns. And through that experience, I was able to work on, I want to say 40 different campaigns across the United States, and also the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden campaign. It was so much work, and I thought, and there were many times where I thought to myself, am I doing this? Is it worth it? There was so much time and commitment being put in. It was all volunteer, so I wasn't getting paid. I had to pick up, you know, little side gigs here and there to, you know, make some money on the side. And you know, I really questioned it for for quite a while, but it wasn't until we're getting so close that I said, you know, wow, like I think my efforts may have been for the better of good. And then, you know, not only did we win the election, but we ended up also winning Georgia and the runoff election, which was so impactful. And that those experiences, my involvement in those campaigns, my organizing in those campaigns, got me the job that I have today. And so now I'm the deputy director of Blue Future, where I'm now leading over 120 different students, you know, across the entire United States. So I think that really goes to show that at the moment, when even if it's a risky or not great decision or something bad goes down, I think if you really, you know, put your mind to it, really have that passion, but also have folks who are around you to support you, I think really great things can come out of those events.
Mine is an old story. It's not as fresh. But when I started activism, I was around 60 years old. It was like 2017. And it was like my first year with Girl Up. And in Girl Up, they encourage you to, you know, like make community events and like panels to, you know, like get the conversation started on feminism and what it means in your community. And I have always been an overachiever. So I was like, I'm going to make this big event, like 200 people, blah, 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 blah. I was 16, okay? Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, we're going to do this. So I just convinced everyone in my school, like, we're doing this. And it was a complete chaos. And in the backstage, it was a mess. But like in the front, it looked very pretty and everyone thought it was perfect. So I think that was very funny. And I feel like what I got out of that experience was definitely that age is not a limit. Like age is not a barrier. Like I really learned a lot about what older people want out of younger people. Like I really learned about like what they want to hear, how you can communicate and navigate those conversations. How can you also stand up for yourself and make sure that you are, you know, you have the right team and the right people with you, so you can also navigate the challenges. Like in that specific event, I remember that we had a sponsorship from a cereal company, and we asked them for like tiny cereal boxes, and they gave us like the big cereal boxes. So like everyone in the lunch break, they had like these big cereal boxes, and that's what they were eating. So it was just like such a funny, weird experience. But I think I wouldn't change it for anything, because I just think that it was just like sort of incredibly educational for me and for the people that were part of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I go next. I had an event last year. I was serving as the co-chair for our equity commission at my university, and we had a really awesome event planned with a well-known Canadian author named Uzma Jalaluddin, and we were really excited about it. She was going to be talking to us about what it means to be a Muslim woman growing up in Toronto and how that translated into her book. And we were pumped. Like, we got food, we got music, we rented a space, we had her coming. It was perfect. And our Facebook page, like 50 people were showing up, and we were like, you know, this is going to be the event of the season. Come day of, I'm not joking when I say this, me and one other person showed up to the event. That was like, and we had planned for like 20 people. And you can only imagine it's just me and her sitting there and the author on the stage. And then the author's like trying to like, get something going with the both of us. And it's just awkward silence. And I'm sitting there in utter like despair because I'm like, what? Like, I felt like such a failure. And it was one of those events where like, yes, I did go cry in the washroom afterwards, which I think is like the normal reaction. But then I like took a step back and I thought about it and I talked with like the commission that I worked with. And it was like, it was right during exam season, which was not a smart idea for us. I think it's because we wanted to fit in something right before the semester ended. And on top of that, like, sure, we did advertise digitally, but we could have done more stuff in real life. So like putting up posters around campus, things like that. And I think like, yes, that was a mistake on our part, but I've learned from it to like be able to hold better events and to be able to kind of get more engagement. So at the end of the day, looking back at it, it's funny. But in the moment, it was not.
Oh, Hannah, I feel you on that one. I think for me, it's always something, I always make mistakes with language because I never can get a language. It takes me a long time to learn a language. Like every mistake that I've made that has worked out for me has been with language. One funny story is when I was in the Philippines, they have like jeepneys, which are like these buses, but like, it's not like a bus. It's like all the sides are open, but like you're still safe. But they're really small. So I was like trying to get out and I was trying to say, excuse me, like I want to pass by. And I was trying to say a joke like, hey, like I'm a big egg. So I was like, oh, Agiko, Dako Coke Itlog. And everyone on the jeepney was just like, oh, and I was like, did I say something bad? But like, I was like, oh, I thought it was a joke. And then I said it every time I was on the bus. I was like, hee, Dako Coke Itlog, Dako Coke Itlog. And I was talking to my teacher and I had a meeting with her and I was like, this is what I say on the jeepney. And she was like, oh, wait. Don't say that ever again. I was like, why? Like, I'm just saying I'm a fat kid. And she's just like, because that can mean you're talking about your private parts. I was like, oh no. So that has been like one of the greatest stories because every time I talk about it, all of my students start laughing at me and they're just like, wow, that's crazy that you did that. I'm like, well, I can't speak every language. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for those. I honestly don't know whether to laugh or like cry on your behalf. That was all your stories, but it was really nice hearing from you guys. But yeah, sorry, this might just be our last question. It's just, do you have any advice on how young people can get involved in like social work or youth work or things like that? And again, I've got no idea on who wants to go first. So just go ahead.
I can go.
Okay.
Oh.
No, Hannah, go ahead.
And I was like, which one of us? We're gonna have to play rock, paper, scissors over Zoom to see who the final winner of this is. But yeah, for tips and advice, I don't necessarily think I can really give any because it's gonna be different for every person that engages with activism or advocacy, right? Like every person's gonna have different struggles that lay ahead of them. And like I think the biggest tip that I can give that would be like over encompassing is to show compassion. I think a lot of the time when you're doing activism work, it can get really like heated and you're in the moment and you just like, you really want something to work out and you're always going to be working on teams with other people. And the only way that like you can make meaningful things happen is by showing compassion to others and understanding where they're coming from. Because if you don't do that when you're working in a group setting, it just like, it's going to make life really difficult for you in the long run. And it's also just like, it's just not a good look. So I think that like, if there's anything you take away from getting involved, it's to just like be a kind person and like put on to others as you would want them to put on to you, because that's needed in every space that you go into.
I will piggyback off of Hannah's because I love that. But I would say be open to like new things because you never know, you might really love something. It could be something new. And then I would say like if you could build resiliency, even if you're just at home, because resiliency is something that like we all really have, and it's like our desire to really bounce back from these hardships. But some situations just really test your resiliency. And when you're working like with tons of different youth or internationally or through activism or through social work or education, it's just people will try you. It is not because they really want to, it's just because, you know, they're having a bad day too. So I think really being able to build that resiliency and know at your core who you are and what you stand for and why you do the work that you do is always going to be really great.
I can go ahead and give my advice. And I have two things to say for two different groups of people. So for the people that haven't engaged with social justice or politics in general, because maybe they are unsure whether that's the right path for them or not. Something that has been brought up in many conversations recently where I have been part of is a Mexican phrase, like something we say a lot here in Mexico, which is, you might not want to get into politics, but politics will get into your life. So like, even if you don't want to get into it, like it will find a way into your life. So I think that's a good thing to think about, especially because maybe you're not looking to be a professional, social justice advocate, or like you're not looking to be an activist, or you're not looking to be A, B, or C, whatever that comes into your mind. But I think it's very important to also like understand how politics and just like things that you might think are very far away from your life actually dictate many things that you think you might not be in control of. So I think that is some introspection that would be very helpful for you if you're trying to find a way into activism and into this sphere. And for the people that are already into activism and already have experience on that, I would say that it's very important to not compare yourself with others, because many times, I remember when I was like 16, Malala was just like such a like big figure that I looked up to, and I was like, she's so young and she's done so much, and it's like her context is different, her history is different, like everything is different. Like there's not a reason why you should compare yourself to other people. Your journey naturally is going to be different, and that's okay, and that's even better because it's going to fit your life, and it's going to change your life for the better. So I think just keep that in mind, and also what Ari said, which is like building resilience and having a community, that's super important.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. They're just honestly so spot on, and I could piggyback off of all of you. But I guess for me, in my own personal experience, specifically, if you ever want to get into starting off to get into politics, or you want to get into elections, again, just reach out to people, right? Honestly, your connections, ways that you connect with these really great opportunities. Again, that's how I started off, just by having a friend who invited me to go canvas, and then all of a sudden now, I'm directing a whole organization where we do this, for people all over the United States. So yeah, I think if anything, again, reach out to your friends, be curious. If it's something that you're really interested about, ask someone if you know someone. So another big tip I give folks, if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on social media and you see someone doing the work that you want to do, again, reach out to them, message them. Hey, I find what you're doing so inspiring. Would you give me a few minutes of what you're doing? Again, folks, especially in these areas, we want folks to get more involved. And so believe me, I am more than happy to sit down and talk to anyone about, getting into the political arena, social media, politics, all of it. So again, use your resources, and let your passion really lead you. It will really bring you to so many wonderful places, and it won't be always easy, and it won't be this glamorous thing, but you will find, again, so much personal happiness and success within it. So yeah, reach out, make those connections. And I think someone mentioned it, but yeah, I'm more than happy to share my contact information to just, again, continue this conversation. And thank you again so much for having me.